Right, good day and welcome to session number 9. And in the last session, we had completed the importance of the revenue pie and where your sales is coming from. And we looked at the different routes to market where the sales is coming from: general trade, modern trade, e-commerce, B2B, franchising, and so on. Session 9, which is the module number 9, which we're going to cover today, will be a coverage of e-commerce. Now, all of us are aware that this is something which is growing very rapidly. What started off as a very nascent industry in the early turn of the century has now become a huge behemoth, which is now gradually eating into sales of the other routes to market. So our coverage for the session will essentially look at the different kinds of e-commerce. So basically, as a student, what you'll be exposed to is what is B2B e-commerce, what is B2C e-commerce, and then within B2C e-commerce, what are the different types of e-commerce. For example, you could have Amazon, which sells virtually every product under the sun, or you have Myntra, which sells predominantly fashion products, or you could have a Decathlon, which sells sports goods. These are different kinds of e-commerce platforms which are available. And then again, you could have a big basket which sells products of all companies, or you could have a website of Bombay Shaving Company which sells only products of Bombay Shaving, which now gradually is being called as D2C or direct to customer. So what we'll cover in this session will be a closer look at B2C e-commerce. We look at the different types of B2C e-commerce. More importantly, what are the pros and cons? See, every channel has advantages and disadvantages, right? There is no such thing as a panacea for all ills or all evils. So when you sell third-party e-commerce, which is like Amazon, which stocks every product, there are certain advantages, there are certain disadvantages. On the other hand, when you sell through your own website, such as Bombay Shaving Company or itcstore.in, there are certain advantages and disadvantages. As a marketing person, we have to weigh the pros and cons and then take decisions. So therefore, in module 9, what we'll be looking at is an introduction into B2C e-commerce and the pros and cons of the different options which are available. Welcome to module 9. Now let's look at the e-commerce landscape, right? And as mentioned earlier, there are two kinds of e-commerce possible. One is B2C and the other is what is called B2B. So we'll look at both, and in fact, I'll be covering B2B also in some detail, because B2B e-commerce has become particularly relevant in the Kirana segment, right? In the Kirana segment, and there's a big player coming called Metro Cash and Carry, which I'll be dealing with in detail. So let's look at the two types of B2C e-commerce. The first is what is called third party. Third party means they don't have a brand. They may have a private label, but they stock anything and everything. It's like if I look at a equivalent in general trade, you could have a Levi store, or you could have a general dukan which sells all jeans, right? So now a Levi store is what is called EBO, exclusive brand outlet, whereas a outlet which sells all kinds of jeans are called MBO, multi-brand outlet. So understand that third-party e-commerce are MBO. They sell any brands which are there. So you have the Amazons and the Flipkarts and the big baskets and the grofers. Then you have specialty stores which sell narrow categories such as fashion for Myntra. Then you have pharmacy and so on and so forth for pharmaceuticals. And then you have Decathlon getting into sports goods. So expect much more action here in specialty stores. That's the third-party e-commerce, right? On the other hand, we also have captive e-commerce, or what is called D2C. So you have companies such as itcstore.in, Bombay Shaving Company, Mamaearth, right? So many of these are what are called digital first companies, and they have invested in captive or D2C e-commerce, right? Which essentially means the difference here is, if I go to itcstore.in, the only brands which I will be able to buy are the brands which are sold by ITC. If I go to Bombay Shaving Company, the only brands I'll be able to buy are the brands sold by Bombay Shaving. So understand, therefore, that these are what are called captive or D2C, and therefore the only brands which are kept there are the brands of the company. So now please think this, please raise your hand and tell me what are the pros and cons of the two options? So what is the advantage of, so let's assume that again, let's stay with ITC. So let's assume Pragya. Pragya is the person handling ITC products. So Pragya, tell me what are the advantages of listing your products on Flipkart or on Amazon Pantry or Big Basket as opposed to your own ITC store.in. Go ahead, Pragya.
So the pros of listing my products in D2C would be starting from it increases the brand's control over its promotional activities, its messaging, brand messaging, and overall customer engagement as such, and it gives a freedom of like to test or like innovate new products like before putting it into the market or selling it in broader terms. Before that, in a smaller scale, you just test it out and see the reviews of the customers. And then it would be like the direct access to the customer data who visit their website. So we can get a lot of insights from it and we can use it to customize our products and services. And
that's for D2C, right? That's for D2C.
Yeah, D2C, the advantage of D2C.
Good. I'll come back to you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And we can also build a long-term relationships by looking at these data and customize our services to specific customers. So that could be one point. And overall, we can also get higher margin by eliminating the middleman from the entire process.
Okay, excellent. Kirat.
So according to me, if I talk about what are the pros and cons in both these platforms, like the captive e-commerce, which is D2C, and the one that is third party. So in third party, what happens is that generally they are already having a huge customer base. So if a brand is trying to launch a product in a third party e-commerce platform, they're already having a huge market base with them, and that they can move on and they can obviously gain advantage of. Like for example, especially companies or startups that are coming in can have a huge advantage of these third-party e-commerce sites. However, what happens is if they don't launch it on a D2C e-commerce platform, is that they are losing on the identity of theirs. So on a third-party e-commerce platform, they might lose their own identity as so many brands are being sold on those platforms. So this is the pros and cons of the third-party platform. But for the D2C e-commerce, I believe that if they go on for D2C e-commerce, what is the con over there is that they will have to manage the entire supply chain. They have to manage the entire logistics. They have to see a lot of costing right from managing the site till the time it is being provided to the customers. But
Good.
their pros is the similar one, that they are having an identity of their own.
Good, excellent. Rishabh.
Yes, sir. So for me, the pros of the D2C or the captive market is captive e-commerce is the entry to the market is cheaper. The profit margins, you are able to realize high profit margins as in intermediate channel partners are not there. And also there is direct control over your brand presence. When talk about the cons of the captive, so it usually it is difficult to scale up, and the complexity of the managing the processes and the internally management is very high. And also with the increasing competition, you are it may so happen that you do not get into the customer focus. When you
Okay,
get
fair enough. So you've covered most of them. Yes, I'll come back to you, Jasmine. Anything new other than what has been mentioned so far? Go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, sir. So basically, all the points were covered, but one point is that the brand loyalty is basically higher in D2C than in the e-commerce.
Good.
E-commerce.
Right, Nishchay, anything different?
Yes, sir. Just two more points. In D2C, I can cross-sell products also. For someone who has come to take Ashirvad Atta, I can sell classmate notebooks. And there is exclusive rich data available in D2C that I can leverage to improve.
Yeah, data is mentioned. So, right, good. I think you've covered most of the points. There's one point you missed out. There's one point which is missed out, which I'll cover. You see, in a third-party e-commerce, let's not forget, you are one brand among many brands. And we saw in the last session, comparison is very easy. As customers, we don't compare much in GT. We compare more in modern trade. We compare most in e-commerce. And e-commerce forces us to compare by giving us things such as reviews. So the moment you give a review, there is more comparison. So understand, somebody had mentioned that for a startup, it is very useful. Yes, for a startup, it is very useful because I don't have any legacy behind me. But if I'm a brand like Lux, which has 100 years of history, I don't like it. If I have 100 years of history, I'm suddenly competing with all these 1-year-old brands, kal ke bacche, kal ke chokre, right? I'm competing with kal ke chokre, which is not very, so therefore legacy brands don't like it. Comparison becomes easy. But understand that the number of eyeballs is much larger. See, please remember, in a physical store, it is footfalls. Right? So when I look at a grocery store, footfalls. If I look at Reliance Fresh, footfalls. Kitne aadmi aaye? The equivalent of that in e-commerce is eyeballs. How many eyes visited that place? So the number of people visiting Amazon pantry or a Flipkart or a Big Basket will be far higher than that of ITC-store.in. So let me ask you a question. Who will go to an ITC-store.in? Which customer? Yes, Ravi?
So someone who's very sure of buying ITC.
Only ITC.
Only ITC.
Which means brand loyalists.
So that's a point that I wanted to make, that the volume, so third party attracts a larger volume, but
Yes.
it's both a pro and a con.
Yeah,
because
that's what I said.
sometimes you might lose your loyal customers there, and sometimes you might attract people who are willing to buy some other product.
Exactly.
The
So therefore,
loyalty is intact.
so therefore, understand that every channel has pros and cons. Yes, Risha?
Is that audible?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
So, so also like the question that you talked about, who will be going to the ITC? So, taking an example of Ashirvad Atta, so if the customer is aware of that Ashirvad is a product of ITC, then and if he is aware about the website that ITC has a store in place, then only he'll
Correct.
able to
Exactly. Right. So that was module 9 or session 9, and let's take a quick summary of what was covered in the discussions. So we looked at the two main types of B2C e-commerce, which is business to customer e-commerce, which means where you and me can buy. And the two broad categories are what are called third-party e-commerce, which stock multiple brands and don't belong to any company, like Amazon, Big Basket, Myntra, Pharmacy. All of these are stock multiple brands. They don't belong to any company. They could have their own labels, like Amazon has its own brands, such as Kindle. But in the case of, that's the first what is called. The second is what is called captive e-commerce, which essentially means it's for a particular company. So when you go to a e-commerce site of Bombay Shaving Company, the only brands you will get are those sold by Bombay Shaving Company. Similarly, if you go to ITCstore.in, the only brands you will get there are the brands of ITC of the company. So those are what are called captive e-commerce, which is nowadays called D2C or direct to customer. So these are the two broad types of e-commerce platforms available in the B2C space. The other thing which we looked at is the pros and cons of each. So what are the advantages of a captive e-commerce or D2C? The first advantage is the most vital one. You have data on the consumer. The consumer visits your site, you know how he or she browses, you know what her search history is, you know what kind of product she buys, he or she, you get data on that. And all this information can actually help you communicate better, get into a dialogue with the customer, and therefore build a stronger relationship. The other advantage is obvious. When a customer comes to your site, you have a monopoly because he or she is going to buy one of your brands. This is a big advantage because we have covered in the earlier sessions that e-commerce is one of the channels where the consumer tends to compare a lot, which means if the consumer has gone to a Flipkart instead of your site, he or she may end up comparing and buying some other brand. which doesn't happen if they come to your site. And then, of course, cross-selling. So if a customer is already there in your site, you can bundle offers, and more so if you have more data on purchase history of the past, you'll be able to bundle offers and cross-sell and upsell products. All of these are obvious advantages of D2C or captive e-commerce. There are disadvantages, of course, and obviously the disadvantages are obvious. First, who will come to a Bombay Shaving Company site or ITC? Somebody who is passionately loyal. So if the customer is not loyal, he or she is not coming to your site. He or she is more likely to be going to a third-party site. So obviously, see, in a physical store, it is footfalls. In a e-commerce, it is eyeballs. They're the same. So the eyeballs which will visit your site is far, far lower than a e-commerce which is third-party. So the traffic which comes in is lower. That's the first. Second, obviously, is reach. Because Amazon sells thousands and thousands of products across the length and breadth of the country, they've been able to develop a supply chain process which delivers the products. That for your company with just your brands, that will take more time, more effort, perhaps more cost as well. So therefore, these are the disadvantages of. Remember, no channel has only advantages. Every channel has advantages and disadvantages. So now there's been a big movement for D2C. Every company is trying to get into D2C because of the advantages which I mentioned. And the most important advantage is data and the capacity of using the data to build long-term relationships with customers, which is the biggest advantage of D2C. That was module number 9. And in the next module, which is module number 10, we'll go a little deeper into this whole business of D2C. What is the recipe for success there? Why do some companies fail? Why do some companies do badly? Those are the issues which will be examined in the next module, which is module 10. See you then. Thank you very much.